Hello, my name is Trisha Bahnsen, and my topic of discussion is going to be the Olympic Games between 1896 and 2022. Every 4 years, the Olympic Games come around. It's a really unifying time for the globe, despite any conflicts that are going on. Each country puts up their best and brightest athletes, and we have over 2 weeks of competition and uplifting stories. The Olympics are really a bonding time for my boyfriend and I, so I wanted to take a deeper dive into the data surrounding the Olympics. More specifically, I hope to answer a few questions about the Games, and my questions include do the host countries have an advantage in the medal count? Are certain countries dominant in the summer versus the winter Olympics? For those dominant countries, are the men and women equally dominant in the same sports? So we'll take a closer look at some of that data. For my data set, I found statistics on the Olympic Games between 1896 and 2022. The Summer Olympics started before the Winter Olympics did, and actually the Winter Olympics up until 1994 were held in the same year as the Summer Olympics, and now they're staggered every 2 years. We have either summer or winter. So there is a little bit more data on Summer Olympic Games since the Winter Olympics didn't start at the same time. So we'll switch over to presentation here. And so one thing that I wanted to point out here is that Germany and Russia have both competed under different names throughout the history of the Olympics. Germany has competed under Germany, the Unified Team of Germany, German Olympic Committee, West Germany, and Saarland. And Russia has competed under Russia, the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, the Unified Team, the Olympic athletes from Russia, the Russian Olympic Committee, and most recently as the individual neutral athletes. So for the purposes of this presentation and to condense the data, they've been condensed to just Russia and Germany. So first, when we look at the map, hovering over a country on the map will give the country's total medal count broken down by the medal type. So for instance, the United States has won 1,222 gold medals, 1,000 silver medals, 872 bronze medals, and that's a total of 3,094 medals. Brazil has won 46 gold medals, 51 silver medals, 83 bronze medals for a total of 180 medals. And there are some places such as Ghana has only won 5 medals total. But any country that's won, you see some countries here in South America and in Africa that have not won any medals. But if a country has won a medal of any type, it'll be listed. Namibia, for instance, has 5 silver medals and no medals of any other type throughout the history of the Olympic Games. A country can be selected using the drop down at the top of the map below up here, or by actually clicking on the country itself. So we could click on Canada here, or we could select Canada up at the top. And once we do that, you'll see the data. We'll go back to Canada. The data will be filtered in the host country medals section, as well as the medal winners by gender and the medal count by season. So countries that haven't hosted a games, for instance, if we go up here and select Afghanistan, they've not hosted an Olympic Games, so that section will be empty for them, but it will still filter. They have had in the history of the Games 2 male athletes that actually won both in the summertime, but they have not hosted, so there's no data for them in the host country medal field. Let's go back to Canada, for instance. That's filtered by gender, and additionally, you can drop down and filter even further to select a specific sport. So for instance, for Canada, for fencing, They actually haven't won any, so there's nothing there. Let's try something like figure skating. They've had 6 female athletes win medals and 9 male athletes win medals in Canada. So you can see which sport so male athletes have dominated sailing for Canada. But you can further drill down to whichever sport just to see the comparison, to see who's more dominant by sport as well. And to answer the question about hosts countries having advantages, so Australia was the most dominant. They won 69 medals in the summer of 2000. They actually were the host that time. But there have been several times Brazil, Canada, Finland, Germany. These countries have all had their most successful year of medal from a medal count perspective as non-hosts. So there doesn't seem to be a true advantage there, but there does seem to be a little bit of correlation there. Certainly, Australia had its best year as a host. China had its best year as a host. France. So, like I said, correlation, but probably not any causation necessarily. Some countries are more successful in summer than in winter. I think you would probably expect some of the warmer climate countries to be more successful in summer, for instance. Also taking into account that the summer games have been around longer than the winter games, so there's a little bit more data there. But Australia, for instance, has won 620 versus 19 of their medals in the summertime versus the wintertime. We could look at somewhere like Ukraine. They as well more dominant in the summer versus winter. Trying to pick some of the colder countries. It's a little more winter medals found for Sweden in the winter than summer. But again, part of that is because there's been more summer games than winter games on record. So I would say my biggest takeaway, I found this information very interesting, and to see it all, especially where we could see how many medals each country's won broken down by medal type. So I did find the subject matter very fascinating, and it was fun to put together. I would say the biggest thing, my biggest takeaway is to make sure that the data is clean. I started with a data set that didn't have your typical profits and sales and, quantities sold and, things like that. So I really had to clean up my data quite a lot. And I think that was the hardest part, trying to come up with some of the formulas to make the visualizations was a little bit more challenging. Walking away from it and coming back to it was the biggest help. Just taking eyes off of, trying to come up with that formula and giving myself a break and coming back to it seemed to help the best. But starting with really good data, I think, is probably the biggest takeaway that I have from the project. But overall, I had a really good time putting it together. I find the Olympics just fascinating. So I really enjoyed the project. So thank you very much for taking a look.